So the other day I posted a picture on Facebook, and my caption said that it was going to be the first topic of my rant and rave, and I promised rant and rave, so here we go. And I'm not going to use a silly filter this time because this is serious. I mean, my Mother's Day rant was serious too, but I didn't expect it to go that long, so. I want to talk about this whole craze of waiting for your Boaz and everything wrong with how we read Ruth. For those of you who have been around for a long time, you know that I have a strong affinity for a biblical hero named Ruth. She is one of two women that have an entire book of the Bible, well, canonically accepted, sorry Judith, dedicated to her story. She is one of the very few women mentioned in the genealogy of Jesus, and she's awesome. She's, in fact, very, very awesome. So how come this is how we're taught to read Ruth?
For girls that are in a hurry to get a boyfriend or get married, here's a piece of biblical advice. Ruth waited patiently for her Boaz, and while you're waiting for your Boaz, make sure that you don't settle for any of his relatives.
Broke ass, lying ass, dumb ass, drunk ass, cheating ass, locked up ass, giving nothing ass, lazy ass, and especially his third cousin beating your ass.
Wait on your Boaz and make sure he respects your ass.
We should definitely be encouraging women to avoid partnering with neglectful and or abusive men when they can be spotted. Sometimes you just don't know until it's too late. We should more so be encouraging men and women both to speak out against sexual violence, preferably without constantly placing the blame collectively upon women's shoulders, but I digress. Having fallen victim to dangerous men in the past, sexual violence is one of my biggest concerns. I have 5 teenage nieces, and I've talked with them a few times about trusting your gut when it comes to guys. You know, your gut, that thing that's about as accurate as the Farmer's Almanac. But that is not the heart of the message of that post. The heart of the message is shaming women into stasis regarding their love lives, with the promise of a fairy tale reward for doing it so long, or like long enough. I'm sorry, that is not the Ruth that I know. The post starts out saying, to all the girls who are in a hurry to get a boyfriend or get married, a piece of biblical advice. Ruth patiently waited for her mate Boaz. This is simply not true. In the vast breadth of Ruth's story, contained in a small, concise space in the Bible, Ruth never waits patiently for anyone. I mean, Ruth is not a long book to read. It's only 4 chapters, and we're talking Bible chapters, so they're like 3 columns of text each. I have read Ruth dozens of times. So many times that I feel like I know Ruth, just like I know my best friends. Ruth has become a part of me. It's like a constant reminder of who I am and how I want to be as a person. A lot of people take Ruth to be, at its heart, a boy meets girl love story. Ruth waits for Boaz, Boaz redeems Ruth, Boaz and Ruth get to be together, and again, no. That picture that I posted, the post claims that Ruth waits for Boaz, and so young girls should also wait for their perfect man. But Ruth didn't wait for Boaz. Ruth married Mahlon shortly after Mahlon's father died. They had been married for 10 years when Mahlon and his brother died. You can bet that in all that time, Ruth was not waiting for Boaz. In fact, she was probably a teenager when she got married to Mahlon in the first place. And she must have been happy with him. I mean, she must have been in love with him because when he died, she dedicated herself and her life to Naomi. Naomi is Ruth's mother-in-law, the woman whose heart flooded with bitterness when faced with the loss of her sons. And Naomi tried to send Ruth away. She said to both of her daughters-in-law in chapter 1, verses 8 through 9, Go, return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant you that you may find rest, each of you, in the house of her husband. But Ruth wouldn't leave her. Ruth was determined to take care of Naomi no matter what. So Ruth embarks on a journey from her home country to Naomi's hometown, hundreds of miles away through famine-plagued desert. And moving to chapter 1, verses 16 through 17 now, she says to Naomi, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go I will go, and where you lodge I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." Phrases from this passage wind up in marriage vows a lot, and I understand why. It's dedication, it's love. It's expressed simply and eloquently and with a lot of passion. I mean, nothing but death will part me from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. We also sing these same words in reference to our relationship with God, who, by the way, is not your boyfriend. Taken out of context, Ruth's statement to Naomi is pretty darn romantic, just like the Ruth Boaz OTP, am I right? But Ruth says that to Naomi, to another woman, to her mother-in-law. How old is Ruth here? Probably in her 20s, anywhere from 23 to 29, I'd say. She's still young, but she's been married for a decade and is a widow, and her dedication goes to Naomi. In fact, Ruth's entire relationship with Boaz is about taking care of Naomi. Ruth waited patiently for Boaz, as that picture suggests. Then why did she, one, go harvest barley specifically in his field, eat with him and his male friends? So much taboo here, guys. Or three, go to the threshing floor at all. Why? Because Boaz, while he's clearly interested in Ruth, isn't making any real moves on her. Actually, in most of their interactions, Ruth is the initiator. Ruth goes to the field to harvest, and then she tells Naomi, and Naomi concocts a scheme to get Boaz and Ruth together. Ruth goes to the threshing floor for Naomi's sake, just as much as for her own. Ruth's ultimate goal in marrying Boaz is not love. It's stability. It's security for herself and for Naomi. So guess what, dumb post? Ruth settled for Boaz. Maybe they were a match made in heaven. Maybe they were super compatible. I know Boaz was protective of Ruth, and that he must have been attracted to her. I also know that Boaz was much older than Ruth, and that Ruth was already a widow, with a mother-in-law to take care of. I do believe that Boaz and Ruth loved each other, but I also see that this is a marriage of convenience for everyone involved. Boaz gains property, Naomi gains security, Ruth gains both security and a son, which is like a double security. Hashtag the patriarchy. And something Milan never gave her in 10 years of marriage. And Ruth is like active in her life, despite the passive role that her society expects her to play. She pursues Naomi, she pursues Boaz, she pursues a standard of respect for others and herself that is above and beyond the norm. That picture, that post, however, just reinforces to girls that their role in life is passive. You wait for your Boaz, it says. You wait for him like your life depends on it. Because there's only that one perfect man, and every other man you meet is going to be a scumbag. All men, except for your one perfect Boaz, are lazy, poor abusers. So, you must wait for that one perfect Boaz to scramble out of the woodwork, and then he will take care of everything for you. only sentiment that post and Ruth have in common is respect. But even that gets cut short in the post by its accusatory nature. After running through a list of awful men types, including beating your ass, the post says, wait on your Boaz and make sure he respects your ass. Do you know what that sounds like to me? That sounds like the speaker of the post blames women who end up with abusers for the abuse that they endure. Now, maybe I'm reading into that a little bit too much, a little too defensively, but all I see here is victim blaming. If only you wait, the post warns, then you won't end up in a bad relationship. It's up to you to wait for the perfect man, and if you don't, then it's your fault. Even if you wait, if you end up in a bad relationship, then you just didn't wait long enough. Also, the post treats domestic violence as funny. Say it with me. Domestic violence is not funny. It is a serious crime. Seriously, did they even read Ruth? The heart of Ruth is dedication and love between women. It's not just a love story. It's not just an allegory of God, embodied in Ruth and Boaz, of course, as the study guides make it out to be. It's about two women who live under a patriarchal oppression that requires them to have men to take care of them financially, but who band together through tragedy and heartache to find a way to survive in the system. It's not about a match made in heaven unless that match is Naomi and Ruth. You know what Ruth should teach young girls that are anxious to fall in love and get married? That's okay, but there will be heartache. Your first relationship, no matter how strong or how loving, it might not last. Maybe it's extreme, like in Ruth's case when Milan died. Or maybe you're in high school when you date and then you go to college and things just change. Or you're in college and then you go to graduate school or you get jobs at different places, etc., etc., etc. Or maybe you truly love someone and they betray your trust in such a way that even though you forgive them, you never want to speak their name again. And that's all okay. Heartache can be survived when we form strong bonds with other women. Date, don't date, whatever. Just be true to yourself and careful with your mind and your body. True love is not once in a lifetime, and it's not just a romantic relationship. Ruth is about love, but it ain't no love story. So all you single ladies, seriously, stop waiting for your Boaz. While it is wonderful and important for us to look at our current day situation and with a biblical perspective, attempting to layer Ruth's story over our own of finding love is, well, it's just plain awful, ladies. Does the Bible have a lot to say about dating and marriage and waiting for God's provision and more? Absolutely. But the story of Ruth and Boaz, it's not just a romantic comedy, y'all, and we certainly shouldn't be looking at it as a great picture of dating and God-designed romance. It's not the best boy meets girl love story of all time. It's not a biblical lesson on taking a calculated risk on love. And I didn't make that up. I had a preacher say that in a sermon series on Ruth. Part of my soul died that day. It's not a biblical example of how sometimes a girl should initiate and show her interest in a man. When we make these haphazard applications from this incredibly rich story in the Bible, we are missing the cultural and historical context and the author's overall record of the story. None of us, please hear me, none of us are Ruth waiting for Boaz. Let me give you 3 reasons why you are not Ruth. Reason number 1, you are not helpless without a man. Ruth was a vulnerable widow in a culture and time where she was at great risk. As a childless widow, she was considered among the lowest, most disadvantaged socioeconomic class. she needed to get married again because she needed a protector and provider. In that day, unmarried women were cared for by their fathers until they were given in marriage to a husband who took the responsibility. But because Ruth's father-in-law and brother-in-law had also died, she had no provider. Destined to a life of poverty until a man chose her. Thank God, literally, this is not yours or my circumstance. Reason number 2, you are not property. Culturally, women were considered property in this time. Now, it's obvious from the text that Boaz does not look at Ruth as acquiring property, but there is another relative in the story who absolutely does. In fact, the closer relative, who goes unnamed in the story, which was not unintentional on the author's part, he is very interested in inheriting her father-in-law's land, but once he realized that Ruth is part of the deal, he bows out. Because he does not want to take care of the responsibility of caring for a widow and her mother-in-law. Reason number 3. You are not trying to marry a distant relative of yours in order to keep your family's inheritance. Or at least I would hope not. You can see in Deuteronomy 25 that at this time in Israel, when a woman's husband died, the closest male relative was required by law to take her as his wife. A kinsman redeemer to protect her and to carry on the deceased's name and take on the family inheritance. Think of it like keeping the estate in the family's name. Now let me give you 3 reasons why this is not a boy meets girl love story. 1. Nowhere in the book of Ruth does it ever say because Boaz loved her. You actually can't even find the word love anywhere in this book. Those of you whose heart is breaking right now, I'm sorry, I really am. Now, there's no doubt that Boaz is a wonderful man. We see dozens of examples in the book of Ruth that show his character, generosity, care, his integrity, not to mention his love of God's law to do the right thing. But Boaz doesn't see Ruth in his field, sleeping on his threshing floor, and fall in love with her. He sees a woman that has a great reputation, that needs a provider. Out of compassion and a desire to do what is right and what the law calls him to do, he sets out to marry her. Boaz also blessed Ruth for not looking for a younger man in chapter 3. Ruth didn't have a love at first sight experience because he was the rugged, handsome Boaz. She had approached Boaz because he was a good man, and most importantly because he was her relative. Number 2. The book of Ruth is about God's sovereignty, his presence in the smallest details, and his plan to send his one and only son to our world. There are miles of evidence in this book about how God provided and had his hand in every twist and turn of the story. But most importantly, God planned to include Ruth, a Moabite who was specifically excluded from the nation of Israel in Deuteronomy, into his family by marrying Boaz, which fulfills the prophecy that Jesus would be born in the lineage of King David. See, Ruth and Boaz had a son who was King David's grandpa. God's plan all along was for Ruth to marry Boaz and to have a child that would secure Jesus' lineage in the Davidic line, just as the prophets had declared. That is the main point of this story and the purpose of it being in the Bible. Reason number 3. The book of Ruth is an analogy of Christ's love for his people. Okay, so maybe I tricked you, forgive me. The story of Ruth is definitely a love story, but not in the way we usually make it out to be. Boaz is a picture of Christ. Ruth could not save herself. She needed a provider, and Boaz did just that. He redeemed her, he provided for her, and sheltered her, which is a beautiful picture of exactly what Christ did for you and me. You and I are destined for poverty. We are vulnerable, we are in trouble, and we have no way to help ourselves. But Christ stepped in and redeemed us. The story of Ruth and Boaz is an analogy for the greatest love of all time. which is Christ's love for his people. So help me out here. Let's stop making Ruth and Boaz a Hollywood romance. Let's stop using Ruth's initiative as an excuse to make a move on a man. While it is great to pray for your future spouse, you don't need to pray for your Boaz to appear. Your Boaz has already come. His name is Jesus, and he already offers you everything you could need and more. There are many women of faith that have gone in prayer and asked, God, where is my Boaz? There are many churches that have preached to single women to continue waiting for your Boaz. Yet, despite all your efforts, Boaz has not come, and frustration has taken its place. This can seem so unfair, but maybe there is a very good reason this blessing has been delayed. So what could possibly be hindering your progress? What could you, as a woman of God, be overlooking while you continue to wait on your Boaz? First of all, we are scared of being vulnerable. Life can be tough, and most, if not all, of us have felt its wrath. Pain and disappointment can cause even the strongest of people to go hide in their corner where it's safer. Well, that is exactly what some of us have done, and it has caused more bad than good. We've built up walls to protect ourselves, but it's the same walls that are blocking our blessings. Those walls restrict love from flowing in and out of us, but true love makes us vulnerable, and that simply scares us to death. Number 2, you have yet to embrace self-reflection. If everyone or everything else is always the problem, then how will we ever see the need to improve? You've embraced the idea that you are all that you need to be, but the reality may be that you've yet to truly scratch the surface. You are still a great woman, and you deserve great love. Yet that doesn't mean that you don't have areas in your life that need correction. And that's me too. We all have room for improvement, and sometimes it'll take making significant progress before you can receive what is truly best for you. And the last and final reason is that maybe we don't completely trust God. We know God, we praise God, we love God, but that doesn't always mean that we trust Him. We may hand over control in many areas of our lives, but when in relationships, you essentially keep one, if not both hands on a situation. This is a relief. God doesn't need our help. He needs our obedience. Our perception of things can never trump His knowledge of everything. It can be very difficult at times to embrace what is within your spirit when what your eyes and ears receive are giving you something different to consider. But if you continue to try to work only within your logic, you might as well tell God His services are not needed. There is nothing wrong with you wanting your Boaz, but there's also nothing wrong with being single. This is an opportunity to grow and love yourself in a way that attract all the things that you need and truly desire. Your time will come, but only if you are willing to put in the necessary work. That requires tapping into God's guidance and learning what your personal journey consists of. So no more waiting on your Boaz. It's time to prepare for him and truly become the woman that God created you to be. And that is today's rant and rave. Stay fragile.